Good morning, afternoon, or evening. Welcome to All Things Social Security. I am Stephanie Joy, the attorney at Joy Disability. Welcome to the channel, and I hope you enjoy the video. Have a great day. Bye-bye. Hello, good morning, afternoon, or evening. Stephanie Joy with All Things Social Security and the law practice of Joy Disability. Talking to you today about probably one of the single most common reasons why someone over the age of 55 might get denied. If you are 55 or older, you know you have the best rules available for you in terms of the medical vocational rules, aka the grids, that make it a little easier for you. You don't have to prove the same thing that a 49-year-old would have to prove. And you have it a little bit easier than a 54-year-old. So you're in a good spot. Imagine you are someone with a skilled past relevant work being the last 5 years, the last relevant 5 years. If it was skilled, so, somewhat brainiac work, not super simple, uneducated work, untrainable, no training needed, you have to be able to prove that you can't do your prior job. Obviously, the grids always require that. SSD age requires that, not just grids. So at 55 or above, you need to prove that you are not able to do medium or higher work. That means you have to be limited to light or sedentary, and that you can't do your prior work, whether it's because physically it's exertionally medium and you can't do medium, or maybe it's heavy, but you're relegated to light work. That's what you need to be found, light or less, or in combination with, you cannot do the mental skills required of that job now. That would be, you can't focus, concentrate enough to do it as mentally fast as needs to be done for that high skill job. It was a demanding job. If sometimes anxiety and depression will have those symptoms where you're constantly worried about something, you're constantly thinking about something that, taking you off task of what you're supposed to be thinking about. So your productivity goes down, your decision making is usually poor. You might be forgetting things at work, missing steps. It can be a relational issue where your interpersonal communications and relationships are taking a hit. That could be evidenced at home, or irritability in stores when you have to wait in line, what have you. Those are the kind of maybe attitudes that are not conducive to a skilled job if you have to deal with other people. So there's all sorts of reasons why it is very possible that someone with a severe physically disabling condition that cuts them out of medium work and now they're relegated to light or sedentary, sit down job or light job on your feet, cashier. The mental health cannot transfer the skills to one of those reduced RFC jobs that would otherwise be available. So if you are 55 and above, you are well able to establish that you cannot do medium level work anymore, or never, if you ever did it, that you can't do your prior job. So let's say you're relegated to light work. They agree you can't do more than light. You're quite impaired, but your old job is light. On your feet a lot, blah, 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 but maybe not severely heavy lifting. They say your old job is light, but you are high skilled. So even though you could do your old job physically, you could have knocked it out if you got that mental health treatment that your attorney might be nagging you to get. If not, because a lot of people don't want to go to a therapist. I get it. They're like, no, it's not like I'm not cuckoo. I'm like, no, of course not. But when we are in pain and we have now lost the ability to work full time, it takes a big hit in our psyche. The adjustment disorder is a common one, but also if we have anxiety, and depression, definite attention grabbers. They take your attention span away from you oftentimes, and the concentration and the memory and the ability to stay on task as much as is needed for a high skilled job. Doesn't mean you couldn't do an unskilled job, because that doesn't really require any of that stuff. But your only goal is to prove that you can't do your prior job, which was high skilled, and you can't take those skills you learned and transfer them to another job that's very closely related, but sedentary or light. All right. If you can't do the job because of mental issues, I know you're saying it's physical, perhaps, but also don't let the mental get away from you, because you can use that. If they say, oh, well, we relegate you to light, but your old job is light. You might not agree with them, but let's say that's their finding. But you could still argue, yeah, but I can't do that high school job. I can't even remember yesterday. My mind is all over the place. So that is what you have to do. It's that past relevant work that's going to bite you if you don't do it, or the transferability of skills. And again, I know a lot of times people who have not had a history of going for therapy don't want to go. I would probably be one of those people. It's like, no, I'll just, I'll deal and I'll figure it out, blah, blah, blah. That's going to make you have a big legal hole in your case. I've seen this. I've seen it recently where there was a denial on recon because you can transfer their skills. There's no treatment. Yeah, there might be some anxiety, some PTSD, some this and that, but it's mild. So now I would also like to argue that even mild symptoms would affect a high skill job. They're not going to affect a low skill job, but that's not what we have to prove. We only have to prove the person can't do the prior job and can't use those skills in a job that would use those skills. Even if there is a job that it would transfer to, but I can't because I can't transfer those skills. I can't even remember them all. I don't remember all the steps. And but it has to be through a medical durational provider records that discuss poor concentration, still complaints, keep forgetting things, tasks done, this, blah, blah, all that. And of course, the interpersonal can be helpful, but again, there that don't on thinking about your days at home. How off is your memory? Are people always reminding you, you already told me that, Dad, or you know, Mom, did you miss that appointment? Things like that. If that's the case, and if you want to prevail in your case, you have to prove that this is so. So the only way you can do that, you saying it, is not going to hold water. That just means you're showing them that this is a problem. And here because it's a problem, I'm going to get it treated. So I got to say it again and again and again, guys, go to mental health, get a once a week counselor. Not only can they, from a substance point of view, and I'm just going to give them a little kudos here, they can help people learn coping skills to deal with the new changes in life with the disabilities and stuff like that, help you better cope and adjust to the new things. Sometimes they can even do better coping with chronic pain. And wouldn't that be helpful, right? But aside from that, you need it for your legal case, or you're not just going to be disabled, you're going to be broke and not getting your benefits. So when someone tells you, when your attorney or a non-attorney rep says, are you going to get mental health treatment? Because that's the only way we're going to weave this needle to show you can't take your prior brainiac skills. It's harder for high skilled people because they have this bigger burden. The unskilled people have no transferable skills. So they automatically pass that step. But the higher skilled people who usually made more money have it a little tougher. So this is how you prove that you have these conditions, these limitations in your cognitive functioning, and do it. You're going to hate this part, but do it durationally. You can't just go to one, I got an eval. See, they said I got PTSD too. Diagnoses don't matter, guys. It's what the therapist is persuaded and treating you for, the symptoms. You have to always be complaining about the symptoms. And I would also say, in addition to the fact that you must get a mental health therapist if you want a stronger case, still complain about all those issues to your primary care whenever you go. Or if you're going to a pain doctor, and just say it's, like memory's so bad now and blah, blah, blah. And, because there's a bigger chance that they're going to start sprinkling that in your medical records because it's obviously relevant to the whole body treatment. Not that they usually care about the whole body treatment. You can do things to increase the chances of those things being in there. And then you will, of course, have the further supporting and even more important mental health professional treating you for those very symptoms. There will be diagnoses, but without confirmed ongoing more than a teeny tiny amount of interference with your cognitive, methods and, way of dealing with things, you need to prove that. And again, snapshot doesn't work. The ALJs and everybody else want to see duration. So if you haven't started that, I suggest you do that. It's once a week. And this is for people with just mild memory concentration interference, not people who have necessarily historically been going to it. If you had, you got it easier, but you got to keep going. For those I'm talking to those that have never, because they've always been okay and able to deal with those stresses. They had good enough memory. They had enough attention span. They're able to focus, able to concentrate. That's how they got the high skills to begin with. But you got to show that something changed. They're not going to take your word for it. They're not allowed to. So get that therapist, guys. Who knows? It may even help. But if nothing else, you're going to need it for your case, or you can just plan on probably losing. All right. Sorry, but it's the way it is. And again, that's if there are if you had high skills and they're by definition usually transferable to something, and something that is at that new exertional thing you can do, because for grids, you have to have physical limitations too. So now you're at a reduced, physical job. You have to prove you can't transfer the skills. And the only way to do it is through medical records, which is mental health treatment records. All right. I know it stinks, guys, if you don't want to go, but it's super important. I'm watching people get denied with it because no one wants to do it. And I'm like, okay, well, that's your risk. I'm just telling you the consequences that you might just see. And of course, that is what happens. So anyway, please, guys, do what you need to do for your case. You deserve to prevail if you're disabled. If you meet those rules, of what defines disability at a particular age, then you deserve to prevail. You've been paying in all this time. Same is true for SSI, but that's not usually what we see at that stage of the game. But usually it's SSD. But the rules would still apply for SSI. Give it some thought. Just do it. Just do it. Step out of your comfort zone. All right. There is a lot of telehealth too. I like to see a little bit of in person, but sometimes it's not possible. Telehealth once or twice a week, probably once a week. If they start cutting it back to every 2 weeks, it signifies possibly some improvement. So you just want to be careful of what the optics are with everything like that. Maybe after you prevail, drop it down to every 2 weeks, and depending on, sometimes you need medication. Sometimes we don't want to take medication and medication really won't help us. So it really depends. So you got to speak to that with your therapist, who's probably not going to be the prescriber. That would probably be your PCP if you don't have a psychologist or a psychiatrist, which a lot of people who have never had a history of mental health struggles are not going to have, obviously. But the therapist can still do it as long as, make sure your PCP, who's a MD or a DO, is well aware of all your complaints every visit. Be that complainer. All right, guys, I'll talk to you later. Bye.